This is Global Tennessee, news, analysis, and commentary from the Tennessee World Affairs Council in Nashville. Global Tennessee is produced in association with the Center for International Business at Belmont University and the International Business Council of the Nashville Area Chamber of Commerce. The World Affairs Council is a nonpartisan, nonprofit educational association, and the views expressed on Global Tennessee are those of the participants.
Welcome to the June 23rd edition of the Tennessee World Affairs Council's Global News Review. I'm Patrick Ryan.
And I'm Amb Bowers.
Today we're going to talk about the top 5 topics in the news from the past week. But first, let me talk a little bit about the Tennessee World Affairs Council. As you know, we're a nonprofit, nonpartisan educational group. We're also a membership organization, and that's how we keep our doors open is through the contributions of members, gifts, and the just fact of being a member. So we encourage you to take a look at tnwac.org and become a member of the World Affairs Council. There's a link to a page with some benefits that come your way with a membership, as well as the world famous Tennessee World Affairs Council coffee mug. So consider. Dick, do you have a mug, Dick?
I do have one. I actually use it, but I put tea in it. So,
okay. A tea mug.
Tea mug.
Tea mug. So take a look at the Tennessee World Affairs Council website at tnwac.org, and please join the World Affairs Council so we can keep Ambassador Bowers in tea. Dick, what are we going to do today?
Well, we got 5 interesting topics. We're going to start off with the COVID-19 update and what's going on with that, because the virus is not going away, even so some people seem to be acting like it might be. Second, we're going to talk about the book. And the book is, of course, The Room Where It Happened by John Bolton. And he sort of tell all about his time with President Trump in the White House. And third, we're going to go to talk about The Finish of the Start. Kind of a tricky title, but basically it's the future of nuclear arms control. Fourth, we're talking about the finish of the love affairs. So Pyongyang, North Korea, is acting up. It's not doing what they were supposed to do. And we'll see what's going on over there. And finally, the finish of American deterrence in Europe, the troop reductions in Germany, our problems with NATO, and what's happening over there in Europe. So Pat, we got first, we want to do the quiz, right?
Yes, sir.
So you want to read it?
I'll take the quiz. Yeah, sure.
Okay.
The What in the World weekly quiz, and just a reminder, every Monday at 10 a.m., the quiz comes out in a newsletter and posted to our website. So if you subscribe to the tnwac.org newsletter, you'll get this every Monday morning in your inbox, 10 questions on what's going on in the news. And in our news review, we pick one of the questions and put it to your consideration up front here, and at the end of our show, we'll have the answer. So the United States and Russia opened talks in Vienna on June 22nd on the extension of this last remaining treaty covering nuclear arms. It expires in February, but can be extended for 5 years with mutual agreement. Is it A, JCPOA, B, New START, C, START 2, or D, INF? Again, subscribe to the TNWAC newsletter on our website to get the full quiz every Monday. With that, let's jump to our first topic, our COVID update, the global snapshot of what's going on. As you can see, the clock ticks on, and there's still a significant problem worldwide with the spread of the COVID-19 pandemic. Cases are up worldwide from 8.1 million cases to 9.2. That's over a million cases in just 1 week. And the death toll amounts, it's gone up from 440,000 to 475,000 again in just 1 week. And the cases in the United States are up from 2.1 million cases to 2.3 million. So that's roughly 1/4 of the global cases for 4 to 5% of the global population. And the death toll as well continues to mount. It's over the 120,000 mark, 122,747 Americans who have died as a result of COVID-19 infections as of June 23rd. Dick, you want to talk a little bit about a couple of snapshots of what's going on around the world in the COVID
let
category?
me give you a quote from the guy in the picture on the left, Boris Johnson, Prime Minister of the UK. And he says, quote, "Today, we can say that our long national hibernation is beginning to come to an end." And they are changing some of the matrices that they use. For example, they have been using a 2 meter, which is roughly a little over 6 feet, social distancing rule. But as of the 4th of July, they're going to be able to ramp it down, they say, to a meter plus. And they're opening up most leisure facilities and tourist attractions. They're going to reopen in shortly. Or on the 4th of July, I don't know why they picked the 4th of July. I guess maybe because it's
it probably wasn't
on a
an
Saturday,
honor of
right? But tourist attractions will reopen, outdoor gyms, playgrounds, cinemas, museums, galleries, theater parks, all that kind of stuff. Close proximity venues, such as nightclubs and big play areas and indoor gyms, will remain closed for now in the UK.
So they're going to open the pubs, but I think Bojo said specifically, don't get too excited in the pubs there.
So what
and,
you could,
we have a Global National with Carl Dean show coming up on July 7th with the Lord Mayor of Belfast. And today we were on a Zoom conference with Nashville and Belfast sister cities folks, and they were talking about relaxing the distancing and so forth. But they remarked that they did see an image which had gone viral the past couple of days of the Kid Rock downtown in Nashville.
Yeah.
Packed in. I told them that resulted in a suspension of the liquor license for 5 days.
Well, they posted that picture on Facebook, and a number of people responded and said, "Oh, that's an old picture. That's not last night, but it was last night."
Yeah.
So some of these places are getting zapped. I don't know how big the fines are, but the health officials are out there saying, "Hey, you can't do what you're doing." So we'll see what happens.
Well, the British are.
There's a big change going on in Saudi Arabia, right? You want to tell us about that?
Yeah, well, let's shift to Saudi Arabia. We have coming up in a couple of weeks, the end of July, July 28th, a pilgrimage in Saudi Arabia known as the Hajj, and that it runs from July 28th to August 2nd. It's a religious pilgrimage, one of the 5 pillars of the Islamic faith that involves all Muslims from around the world at least once in their life are expected to go to Mecca to perform the pilgrimage. It's a sacred rite, and not only that, it's a major source of income for the Saudi economy and the prestige of the monarchy. So right now, with the pandemic impacting economic activity in the kingdom and a double whammy of oil prices being down, their main source of income, taking a hit on the Hajj is going to be significant.
How many people traditionally make that Hajj every year, Pat? Do you know?
Well, it's over 2 million a year, and that includes pilgrims who come from within Saudi Arabia, both Saudis and other country nationals who live in the kingdom. But
if I'm correct, don't they all have to funnel into a particular area in the Kaaba and go around it and things of that sort? So social distancing almost impossible, isn't it?
Yeah, we slipped our slide there. I don't know. Okay.
Yeah, down in the one on the left there.
Center. So the Hajj is a pilgrimage to Mecca in Saudi Arabia, and you can see circled on the map the area where Mecca is, and that over the years, I mean, this is not a new religious observance. This has been going on for centuries, and the port of Jeddah near Mecca was always the entry point for pilgrims. They would come in by ship. Thousands and hundreds of thousands of them, but with the advent of air travel, there are now well over 2 million every year. People fly in. The airport's been expanded. There's been incredible adjustments to the infrastructure. You can see the Grand Mosque of Mecca in the central picture, and then the panorama up top, and the Kaaba, the black, the small building, which which is the center really of the Islamic faith. When Muslims perform their prayers every day, they face towards Mecca and that structure there, the Kaaba. You can see some other pictures there of pilgrims lining up. So as you mentioned, Dick, this is not go to one place one time. This is over the course of those 6 days, the pilgrims travel a route from Mecca through a series of places each day where they have specific religious observances. So can you imagine, I've heard of up to 3 million in some years.
Wow.
Last year, the Hajj was over 2 million pilgrims.
So you know what they're going to do? I mean, are they going to allow a few people to show up, or
well, this
nobody?
this year will be very limited. They're limiting it to Saudi citizens and third country nationals who reside within the kingdom.
Wow.
So that
So
will be
if you're a poor Indonesian Muslim who is now 70 years old and you've saved your life to go on your Hajj, you're out of luck. Right?
Wait till next year. Yeah.
Till next year. Oh boy. Okay.
And there's restrictions, quotas by country, and occasionally there's been flare-ups with between Saudi Arabia and Iran on pilgrims
Right.
and so forth. So we'll see what happens. Okay, on we march to
Topic two.
Topic 2, which is the book.
Well, I have not read the book. Have you read the book?
I have not read the book, and I probably won't buy the book.
Well, I'm sort of probably won't buy it either, because I think somebody will undoubtedly send it to me. So we'll figure it out from there. But there are bootleg copies that are out. I mean, first of all, the question was, could it be published or not? And the Trump administration went to the courts and said this book contains classified material and it hasn't been cleared by the powers that be within the government, and therefore it should not be published. And the administration lost that legal battle. So the book is coming out today as we speak, I believe, on Tuesday, right?
Yep, it's out as of midnight this morning. And,
midnight,
and the book we're talking about is called The Room Where It Happened by John Bolton.
And that's a little play on words from Hamilton, where they have one of the great songs, "The Room Where It Happened," when the deals were made and things were decided. So it's a tricky title. Do you know John Bolton, Pat?
I have not met Mr. Bolton.
Well, I've met him, and I think the most I can say about John Bolton is probably staying away from him is a good thing. He is an opinionated individual, and I'm kind of hard to deal with, but he has had a long career and staying power within the upper ranks of those doing diplomacy for the United States. I mean, notice your slide up there, you've got some interesting pictures with George W. Bush and Condi Rice, right? And then
I think that's when he was named UN ambassador.
Okay.
From the United States.
And on the right up in the corner, you've got some Russians.
I think when he was appointed UN ambassador, wasn't that a
recess appointment?
Recess appointment, because they couldn't get
Senate
enough.
would not confirm him.
Right.
So
but you're right. He's been
around.
There he is with Secretary of Defense Dick Rumsfeld.
On the upper right, and down below is with
meeting with some
Trump,
Russians.
Right? Yeah.
And I think the couple of things mentioned in the book, one of them was that meeting with President Xi Jinping of China. One of the allegations in the book is that President Trump asked Xi Jinping for support in his election bid by agreeing to certain trade terms. And we're not going to litigate the book, but it does point to again, Dick, some of the problems that we have in international relations with our partners around the world, who find that some of these stories, especially, like you said, this guy's been around a while, and while not everybody likes his style, most people who know him say that he's a truth teller. So we have a problem with around the world with the perception of what's happening in our government.
And there are kind of at least two controversial issues here going on. One is, why did he wait for the book to come out and he didn't testify in the impeachment trial? Because he has said on the follow-up to push the book that they could have used this in the impeachment trial and they could have used that, but he specifically declined to testify unless he was subpoenaed, and waited until the Senate got the articles of impeachment from the House. And at that point, of course, the Republicans were not going to summon him, so he didn't testify. The other thing that I think is the legal aspects of this is out there quite a bit, and Trump administration will go full bore back at him, saying this is a lot of hearsay and nonsense, as well as the issue of is there or not any classified material. And I heard the president say something, you know, everything I say to somebody should be classified. Presidential conversations are all classified. So we'll see what happens. But
I don't think an impartial classifier would come to that conclusion. But you're right. This remains a legal problem. It's not over. Over the weekend, there was a judge who ruled that the book could be released, and it was kind of the horse already out of the barn. The books were distributed around the country. They hadn't been officially released to bookstores, but hundreds of journalists had copies, and they were going around on the internet in PDF files.
Yeah, I think
so
the press are pulling stuff out. I mean, they've taken out, for example, that the Bolton says that. According to Bolton, Trump told Xi he has no problem with what he's doing with the concentration camps in the western part of China involved with the Uyghurs, which is kind of, and then he said something about Venezuela and how it might be really cool if we went down there, and that Venezuela was really part of the US and he was ready to invade when the time came. So there's a lot of things that are going to throw out.
He asked his advisors why we have troops in Iraq and Afghanistan and not Venezuela. I think one of the supposedly comical observations was Trump questioning whether Finland was part of Russia, and he was surprised that the United Kingdom had nuclear weapons. So I'll wait to hear more now that the book is out today. I suspect there'll be more of those sorts of jabs at President Trump. And maybe some more embarrassing disclosures about.
Yeah, you know, Fareed Zakaria, whom you and I both kind of think is a really good guy and has good things to say about it, saying, you know, he doesn't really comment on the book, but one thing that comes clear is the issue of character on the part of the president and what kind of character that man in the White House has, and you know, is he fit for leadership in the United States? So that's going to be discussed for quite some time, I think.
So that's the book, and we will wait to hear more about it. The legal consequences for Mr. Bolton, whether he has to forfeit profits or possibly face a criminal trial for releasing classified material, or if it does well on the book stands. I think it probably will. It certainly got enough push. It seems that President Trump, when insiders write these books, he assists in the promotion of them by tweeting about them.
Right. Instead of just ignoring it and saying, you know, that's a bunch of nonsense. I'm not going to waste my time.
Or not even commenting at all.
He stokes the fire. You know, people, oh, does it really say that? Well, I better go check that out. See what's going on. Right. You know.
Yeah, he's got dozens of tweets about Bolton and about the book.
Well, and he's got, you know, how many people in his former cabinet have come out with these books, including, you know, Mattis and various others. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah. Okay, on to topic 3, the finish of the start, the future of U.S. Or the future of nuclear arms control that the United States and Russia are involved in. The New START, and there's a hint on your question of the week. New START is the treaty that we're talking about.
Don't give up the answer. Now, come on.
And let's see if we can manipulate the slides properly here this time.
You know, Pat, you're to be congratulated for coming up with this the headline topic. You know, the finish of the start. I thought that was pretty kind of cool.
Well, we're working on improving our game here. We're not ready for Comedy Central, but we've got some
that's good
objectives out there.
So there's the limits out there with New START, huh?
Yeah. Well, the New START was an extension of arms control agreements that run back decades. The United States and the former Soviet Union sought to limit the numbers of nuclear weapons in the world that were mostly aimed at one another. And there were a series of treaties, the SALT, the Strategic Arms Limitation Treaty. Then we began a series called START. There was the Strategic Arms Reduction Treaty, and there was an interim agreement, the Treaty of Moscow, which ran a couple of years. It was kind of a bridge from START to New START. So in 2011, the United States, President Obama, and the Russian Federation, President Medvedev, who was jammed there in the middle of a couple of terms of Mr. Putin, they signed an agreement, the New START agreement. And it provided primarily for the reduction of warheads, deployed missiles and bombers, deployed warheads and bombers, deployed and non-deployed launchers, and you can see the numbers there. So what we're talking about is the triad, and both the United States and the Russian Federation use a triad of nuclear strategic weapon systems consisting of bombers, land-based intercontinental ballistic missiles, and submarine-launched ballistic missiles. And you can see some examples of some of those things there. A ballistic missile submarine.
You were a member of one leg of that triad, were you?
Yes, yes, sir. I did a tour aboard the USS George C. Marshall. It's a ballistic missile submarine. It carried the Poseidon submarine-launched ballistic missiles. So I'm familiar with how the mechanics of that works at the ground level, or the underwater level, as it were. And so I've had an interest in following what the developments have been in this area for some time, and it's interesting that the New START, which runs through February 2011, can be extended simply by agreement of both sides. And
why wouldn't we want that to occur?
Well, it's interesting. First of all, President Putin said that he would agree to an extension, and this is simply the leaders of both countries signing the extension. Yep. On the American side, there have been signals that we want a new treaty, that we don't want to extend New START, and that the primary reason is that we see a rising China with a growing inventory strategic weapons, also on bombers, land-based missiles, and they do have ballistic missile submarines, but their total numbers are nowhere near what the Russian Federation and the United States possesses. Yeah. So the inclination of the United States, certain policymakers, is that we want to bring China in, but China says, forget about it. That's between you and the Russians. We've got nothing to do with it, and we're just not interested. For Russia's part, Russia says China's not going to get in this, and Russia would like to see a new START extension.
And the French and the Brits, who also are nuclear powers, as well as Israel, although Israel says it doesn't talk about it. They're not involved in any of this activity. And
there are a couple of others: India, Pakistan.
India and Pakistan out there, yeah.
But those are
and the North Koreans, of course.
Yes, the North Koreans. We're still waiting to see about their mating up of a hydrogen bomb on an ICBM. But yeah, you're right. There are other nuclear-armed states in the world.
But the numbers, I think, is the key, Pat. I mean, we're hundreds and times more than these other countries have.
For sure. The idea is that the two large inventories get brought down to a ceiling that's manageable. And the reason this is important is for strategic stability. The more weapons that are out there, the more likely there is for
stuff could happen.
An accident or an inadvertent launch. And over time, you've probably heard of some of these events. One side or the other was falsely alerted that they were being fired upon, and were ready to return fire.
They were ready to retaliate. And we fly these bombs around, and we've had problems in the past. For example, in Spain, where one of the airplane crashed, they dropped one of the bombs, and it spread all over the field in Spain, the radioactivity everywhere. So accidents can happen.
There's a hydrogen bomb off the coast of Georgia that they never found, off Tybee Island.
Yeah.
So yeah,
when in Arkansas they had a missile that went rogue, right? It didn't blow up, but it was almost to the point where they had to evacuate the whole area and do sorts of things like that. So
Yeah,
anyway.
back in the middle 80s, the
Right.
Soviet Navy had a ballistic missile submarine off the coast of Bermuda. They had a fire in the missile compartment and the submarine sank.
Yeah.
So there are, a missile compartment full of ICBMs on the bottom of the Atlantic. So yeah, the more of these we have, the more dangerous a world it is. Ideally, there would be no nuclear weapons. I don't think that's achievable in the near future. But if we can limit the numbers, and there's also an impact on the U.S. economy. We're about to enter into a period of developing the next generation of bombers and land-based missiles and submarine
billions of dollars,
submarine ballistic missile carriers, and it's over the lifetime of those systems, it's in the trillions.
Oh,
So it's not just a one-year expense. It's spread that over 30, 40 years. So the smaller number of launchers that we have to have, the better for both sides. So that's a new start, and we will see how the negotiations go. They're meeting.
Well, I hope they just pick up the paper and sign the name and get on with it, and then they can start negotiating a new one. But they have 5 years to do that in, right? I mean, right now we're run out of time. It's February when it expires.
Next February, February 2021, the 10th anniversary of the signing. I think that signing was in Prague in 2011. Okay,
so that's the finish of the start. And how about the finish of love affairs? So how about, let me give you some background here to start off with. So there was a summit in Singapore in June of 2018. And there we signed with the North Koreans a joint statement agreeing to security guarantees for North Korea, new peaceful relations, the denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula, recovery of soldiers' remains from the Korean War, and follow-up negotiations were to take place. About 6 or 8 months later, in February of 2019, in Hanoi, the White House and the North Koreans were to meet, and they announced a shortcut and that no agreement would be forthcoming. Trump later clarified this was due to North Korea's request to end all sanctions on North Korea, and the United States was not willing to do that. In September of 2018, the New York Times reported that North Korea is making nuclear fuel and building weapons as actively as ever. And also in September of 2018, Donald Trump says he has been in correspondence with North Korean leader Kim Jong-un, and they fell in love, quote unquote, because of Kim's beautiful letters. But it looks like the love affair is not really gonna stay for a while.
No, the summits, which a lot of people, even critics of President Trump generally, gave him credit for trying to move the dime on this of decades of nothing happening between the two sides. And we had the multi-power negotiations, the United States, South Korea, Japan, Russia, China, North Korea, and we have a terrific podcast with Ambassador Chris Hill on our podcast inventory. He was chief negotiator to that. So if people want background on those negotiations, take a look at our podcast.
Well, we had the wonderful photo op of Donald Trump stepping over into North Korea.
That was that was another visit. It wasn't it wasn't ranked among the summits, but it was.
It was just a handshake kind of propaganda thing.
You could put these down to confidence building measures, but in the 2 years since the Singapore summit, we've got nothing to show for it, as you mentioned.
North Koreans are full steam ahead on developing their nuclear weapons capabilities as well as their delivery systems. I mean, it's one thing if they're sitting thousands and thousands of miles away from the United States and then have a bomb or two. It's another when they have the capability of mounting that weapon on an intercontinental ballistic missile and targeting Seattle or San Francisco. So.
Right, and what analysts believe the result was of these summits was the North Koreans improved their position vis-a-vis the United States and the rest of the world that wants to see a denuclearized Korean peninsula. Kim Jong-un gained international stature by meeting on the stage with Donald Trump. And it did cause some relaxation of sanctions, not officially, but in practice, China and Russia saw an opportunity to increase the economic trade, the flows with North Korea as a result of what they called lessened tensions between North Korea and the world. So the summits, history will be a judge, but right now, nothing to show for it in terms of denuclearization or North Korea.
Well, the North and the South are farther apart than they were, a couple of months ago. In fact, the North just blew up a joint liaison office that the South and the North had put right over the border in North Korean territory, but still very close to South Korea. And all of a sudden, the North Koreans have decided to destroy that facility because the South is doing stuff that it doesn't like, particularly somehow allowing its citizens to put propaganda leaflets on balloons and float those things up into North Korea, among one of the many issues that they have.
Yeah, that seems to be an ongoing annoyance to the North Koreans, but certainly there's more to it than just that. I think one of the things we don't look at very often is the inter-Korean talks and what's going on between North and South. They're trying to they have a reunification minister in South Korea, and they're trying to take steps to reduce tensions and confidence building measures. And the liaison office that you talked about, and an economic zone in Kaesong in North Korea, just across the demilitarized zone, the 38th parallel, was one of those signals of confidence building measures. So last week it was in the news that North Korea blew it up, and they had been warned. They had warned the world that South Korea was going to pay a price for not doing the things that they were being called upon to do. And the sister of Kim Jong-un, her name is Kim Yo-jong. She was
speculation that she's kind of making a power play move, right? Trying to move up the ladder. And
well, we talked about a month ago that Kim Jong-un had fallen out of sight for an extended period of time, and there was rumor that he was in ill health. Some even speculated that he might have passed, but as it turns out, he reappeared and was back in the news. But during that period where he was out of sight, there was rumor that his sister, Kim Yo-jong, was in position to become the new supreme leader. So the fact that she was the one last week that put the warning out to South Korea about their provocations and that they were going to pay a price, and then this building was blown up.
So where does this leave us? Is the United States in a better strategic position vis-a-vis North Korea and South Korea than we were, 3 years ago, or are we not?
I don't think so. I think we're back to a period where North Korea is building nuclear weapons, building intercontinental ballistic missiles and other weapon systems that can threaten their neighbors and U.S. forces in the Western Pacific.
So if I remember correctly, Pat, when President Trump, before he was president, after he'd won the election, he met with President Obama. And one of the issues that they agreed that they talked about was the threat from the Koreas. And it's still there.
That's right.
And every president prior to Obama, this has been going on for a good
Obama told Trump that North Korea was his number one
problem,
security
right?
problem. Yeah, the thorniest of thorny issues. So it has analysts wondering why the North Koreans now are doing what they do, and it boils down to three issues that are up. And a fellow named Van Jackson, author of On the Brink, Trump, Kim, and the Threat of Nuclear War, says that the North Koreans feel betrayed by Trump, that he entered the summits and gave them a sense that they would secure relief from economic sanctions, but have not yet seen any of that. Secondly, their economy is under great strain as a combination of those trade restrictions, especially with China due to COVID-19, and the escalating U.S. campaign maximum sanctions, increasing the need for sanctions relief. And the third reason that that Van Jackson gives is that Kim Jong-un's sister is undergoing a process of establishing her bona fides as a person of authority, and needs to show strength and competence to both elites and the militarist elder generation in North Korea. So it's still unclear if she's being groomed to be the next leader if something befalls the dear leader Kim Jong-un. All right, Dick, on to
Should we finish to the finish?
And we had the finish in the book story too, with Finland as not being part of Russia, but
well, that's true.
I digress. So let's finish with the finish.
Finish of American deterrence in Europe, you write. Troop reductions in Germany. So approved by Putin, blindsided by Germany, or it blindsided Germany, not by Germany, and it was opposed by many officers, diplomats, and specialists. You know, when I was a practicing card-carrying diplomat, the process that the president and his advisors would lay out strategic visions of where we want to go in the world. And then the worker bees would start trying to flush this out. So if, for example, the White House wanted to reduce our troop presence in Europe, they would let people know, we want to vet this, study this, how do we best go about doing it? Do we want a unilateral reduction? Do we want to try to shift forces? What do we want to do? And then it was kind of bubbled up through the bottom, and everything was distilled and everybody was on board when it finally got presented to the president. In this White House, the process appears to me to be the president has an idea, he tweets it and says, this is what we're going to do. And then everybody starts scrambling to try to figure out, how do we do this? What do we do? You know, Ann Richardson, who's the, I guess, former senator from Texas, she was on one of the, I think it was Amanpour and Company, and was basically being grilled about, you're now our ambassador to NATO. Did this come as a surprise to you? And she didn't say yes, and she didn't say no, but the body language was kind of interesting. And she ended up saying, well, we're looking at where our troops are deployed and where they might better be deployed. But it's clear that the US troop president is in Germany is in our best long-term interest. And to just unilaterally decide, pull our troops out, because all of those that are there are in a position to support our foreign policy and military policy elsewhere, particularly in the Middle East and Afghanistan, and to some extent in Africa. So
right, you know, we had this as one of our stories a couple of weeks ago, and we showed the map, more detail than you can see here of the U.S. installations around Europe. And they're heavily positioned in the United Kingdom with Air Force bases there, Mildenhall and so forth. In Germany, Army forces on the ground, Air Force wings at Ramstein. Northern Italy, Aviano Air Base, the American presence in Naples, the Sixth Fleet. We now have deployments in Poland and the Baltic states. So the U.S. military is present in Europe in large numbers.
You left out your Navy guys. You've got Italy and Spain and the UK. And
well, yeah,
Greece,
in Naples, that's the belly button for the Sixth Fleet.
Yeah. And we've got a huge Air Force presence in Turkey, in Chile.
That's right. I left that one out. But, you know, we were looking at during the Cold War of troop level footprints in the hundreds of thousands. So we're nowhere near what that was. There were post Cold War reductions down to the current levels. But this is signaling both to friends and foes, and also to war planners in the U.S. military, that we're in a new era. And you rightly mentioned that the troop presence in Germany bolsters not just the defense of Europe from possibly an expansionist Russia again, which 10 years ago we didn't think was likely, but we had to be prepared for it. but you rightly say that that presence is the jumping off point for U.S. military operations in Afghanistan, Iraq, the Persian Gulf, North Africa, throughout sub-Saharan Africa. The commander, the U.S. commander who oversees U.S. operations in Africa, is actually based in Germany. So it sends a troubling signal from the perspective of this analyst. And the Germans likewise were rattled by this. They didn't see it coming and were not consulted, and they're worried about it.
Well, you know, many of these countries, if not all, I mean, the United States is either their best friend or certainly one of the most important friends that they have. And in international relations, just like friends that you've got next door or around the block or you've known for a long time, trust is a very important thing.
Right.
And it takes a long time to build trust and understanding, and I can count on this guy, and he understands kind of stuff. And to squander it by just throwing stuff out, and all of a sudden, I know the Europeans are sitting there thinking, can we count on the United States? If something happened, would they live up to their NATO commitments, you know, in Article 5 or not? You know, what would happen? And for a long time, the United States and its nuclear umbrella was something that countries around the world could count on, especially like Japan and Germany, non-nuclear powers, South Korea, and
non-nuclear powers that we wanted them to remain non-nuclear powers.
Exactly, but I would think that at least some people in those countries are beginning to think of, well, what is our long-term relationship with this country called the United States? And should we be positioning ourselves both militarily and economically and in terms of alliances so we have a different take on what's going to happen in the world? So it's a mess, put simply.
Yeah, for sure. Well,
and I don't know where it's going, Pat. I mean, you know, the answer is, I think that the more responsible international folks around Mr. Trump are scurrying around trying to say, hey, here's what we ought to do. Here's how it's going to work out. And I think it'll be one of these things that will just kind of go away and the troops will not be leaving. So we'll see.
Well, you're 100% correct. And in fact, the news peg this week was the fact that a group of Republican lawmakers urged President Trump in a letter to reconsider his decision to cut the number of troops. It was 6 Republicans led by the House Foreign Affairs Committee's senior Republican, Michael McCaul.
Right.
They talked about the footprint in Germany serving America's strategic interests. And they outlined the same sorts of things that we've discussed here. They said that it was not time to take any action that might cause the Putin regime to question the credibility of the NATO deterrent or might lead our NATO allies and partners to doubt the U.S. commitment to our collective security. So you're right, it's worrying to both sides of the aisle. Maybe we'll finally get some action.
I think with some of these things, the election coming up is going to either, if President Trump is reelected, then I think we're going to see more of this, and it's going to become even more unstable for a while, at least. If he is not reelected, then I think you'll see a different kind of foreign policy being pushed in, more going back to the status quo ante kind of activity.
Okay,
time's
Dick,
up almost.
That's time up for that. Let's take a look at the answer to our quiz, since we gave it away in our conversation about New Start. But the question again was the U.S. and Russia open talks this week, extending this last remaining treaty, and the answer was, of course, New Start. So that's that, and we invite everyone back to join us next week
Tuesday,
for a news review.
right?
We're going to have a special guest host, Breck Walker, a member of the Tennessee World Affairs Council Board. He's a professor of the history of diplomacy, so he'll be a great addition to our ability to comment and analyze events as best we can from our perspectives in yours in diplomacy and my background in military intelligence.
All right, Mr. Pat Ryan, Lieutenant Commander, retired. See you next week.
Thank you, sir. It was another great opportunity to get together and talk with you about what's going on in the news. And thanks to everybody for joining us. Please, again, take a look at the...
No questions out there this week, huh?
No questions. A silent majority in the wings there. We'll have to...
We must have covered it so well that they're just...
There was one comment. Our friend Alan Ramseur commented about the fine on Kid Rock at the Broadway honky tonk for packing it in there when we were talking about COVID.
One of my places, the Crow's Nest, right near the Green Hills Kroger, they got zapped. Evidently, their wait staff was not wearing masks, and they got fined for that.
Well,
so we'll see.
Well, thanks, Alan, for contributing that comment, and come back next week with some more questions. Ambassador Dick Bowers, thanks again. Everyone, again, take a look at the tnwac.org website, where you can sign up for our newsletter and get the weekly quiz. You can also sign up to become a member or make a gift to the World Affairs Council. We are a tax-exempt IRS 501c3 organization, so I don't know what that will do to your taxes, but it may do something.
In the old days, it was important.
Yeah, I'm many things, but I am not an accountant.
All right.
Thanks.
We'll see you.
We'll see you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.